Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. My name is AVRGjones, and today we're drawing our boy Luffy from One Piece. This has to be one of the coolest characters ever created. He's got so much potential for growth, especially in the world where he's a pirate going from land to different lands and meeting different people and all these different events. And it shows on the manga, right? Because it's already past 1,000 chapters. But it's also great because he has a personality where he doesn't take himself too seriously, but we all know he's a badass. When he needs to turn it on, he can. That's why it's a lot of fun to illustrate him, because you could do so much when you're drawing it. I wanted just to show a little bit of his powers, but a kind of more of a throwback. Not quite so much in the land of Wano they currently are, but this one is going to show the gum fruit that he's activating here in his right fist, where he has that black glistening rubber. I try to throw some pinks and some blues on there to make it glisten and catch your attention. And then of course he's stretching out towards the land like he just jumped right off the page, coming right at you. I had this concept where he would hit one of the male birds as he's flying up from the ground, and all the little wanted posters would just scatter all around him. I think it'd just be cool and just a good idea to emphasize on where he was at this point in the manga. But what we did here is I went ahead and skipped a little bit. I didn't show the sketch as much or the undercolor, but right here what you see is just all the planning I did. It's a rough sketch, some rough colors, and then I just go in and I'm starting to refine everything now. So what I'm trying to do is I picked the skin tone, I threw in some purples in there and some oranges. That way it really makes the skin pop. But it also shows the time of day. You know, the shadows need to be nice and saturated, otherwise the image could just be really dull and boring, and sometimes you can make it a little too dark and it can get away from you. I also kind of struggled a little bit here with the expression I had on his face. I like the teeth where he looks like he was kind of gritting him, coming at you, but then I realized in all the illustrations and references I was able to find of him, his mouth was always a lot bigger. So later on in the video you'll see me emphasize that, and I think it turned out great. Moving along here to the shirt he has. Around the time that he started activating this power, he had this type of shirt here that was the long sleeve with the real flared out edges there on his forearms. So I wanted to be true to it as much as I could for that time era in the manga. But also just thought it was a cool concept that he had. I don't want to go too dark here where the shadows hit, but I want to emphasize that light is passing under his arm. Because of course the sun is beaming in from that top left corner there, which is our light source. Keeping the reds nice and warm, using some oranges. Later on I might even throw some pinks in there. That way I can emphasize it even more. And also just give some contrast, make it a little bit more interesting to look at. I do that quite a bit. I'll throw colors in there that may not necessarily make complete sense, but they're still within that spectrum of color, or close to it. Just gives the overall image a nice pleasing aesthetic. So we're moving on here to the hair. Now hair when you're drawing anime characters can be a little difficult. You want to keep it simple, but a lot of times I like to just try and go as detailed as I possibly can, and then I do that and I realize it doesn't make sense at all with everything else that's going on in the image. So I have to learn to dial that back. And you kind of see me go through it here a little bit with his hair. I'm doing a lot of playing around with it, trying to make it look the way I want. But also I'm trying to input a little surrealism into it, because people with black hair, if you look at it closely in the sunlight, there's always traces of brown in there. So on that side where the sun is hitting, I am putting some brown in there to emphasize that. And it's also going to help a little bit bring it off the page, because it just looks like a flat black, pretty much just pointy hair right now. And then I'll add a little bit more highlights on there with some whites and some blues. Get some of that color of the sky in there to make everything cohesive. You know, it's funny, I actually was planning to draw Zoro before I got to Luffy, but I just had this great idea for Luffy and I was like, I just have to do it. But I did about 2 attempts of Zoro here in the past, and I just did not love them. So I'm going to go back to the drawing board and see what I could do for Zoro. But he's definitely one of my favorite characters. I got to give it up to Zoro. He's one of the most coolest characters in the franchise. Which reminds me, if you guys are watching this video and you made it this far, If you have any character requests, anything else you'd want to see, let me know. Go ahead and put it in the comment section below. Also, make sure while you're here, go ahead and have a thumbs up on the video, hit that thing, subscribe if you haven't already. I mean, this really helps me out. Lets me know that you guys are engaged, which is the most important thing for me, is trying to figure out content that's going to keep you guys wanting to watch it from start to finish. If there's any critiques, anything you guys would like to say, anything that would really inspire you to stay longer and watch, let me know. I'm open to any suggestions. I'm working on the islands here in the back. I'm doing backgrounds. For any artist that knows this, if you're not primarily a background artist, more of a character artist like myself, backgrounds can really take a toll on you. You know, when you're drawing characters, you know, the concept of them is a lot of detail. And it's easy to get away with it. You could put a lot of detail anywhere for the most part. As long as it's not taking away from the focal area, I should say, then it's okay. But in this case, it's the background, so you really don't want it to take away from the character, especially all the work you just did. But you want it to do enough to sell the image that he's in this place and things are happening around him. So what I'm doing now is I looked up a couple references of islands, and I found some pretty cool references. They have some sandbars that were going around these islands that did these cool shapes, and later on I'll put those in. You'll see it in the video, but I was really trying to emphasize that because this is a world that we don't live in. I mean, this is something you can do anything you want. I mean, he's literally a pirate that goes all around the world discovering new things, and why not have some fun with what we're designing here? It doesn't have to be 100% accurate to the source of, you know, the manga or the anime. I'm using a lot of greens here. I'm fluctuating between yellows and greens. I'm really trying to look at the references that I have and pick from those things that are actually going to help this image. Nothing that I'm using is actually directly from the reference. I didn't copy any of the shapes or anything like that. Just mainly the colors is what I was needing. The water does some tricky stuff too. As it gets closer to the shore, you'll see it gets really light where the land is, and it has that cyan, you know, turquoise color. And then when the water gets deeper, it's a nice rich blue. But then as you get further away, you want to emphasize that water is getting lighter. So I definitely had to choose a different color. And this is a top-down aerial view, so you're not going to see the horizon line like we normally would. It's more going to be just beaming right down on the character in the water. So that was a little tricky, especially for me, as like I said, I'm not much of a background artist, but I'm learning. But so far, I mean, I had a lot of fun actually. I feel like I learned a lot. Right now I'm throwing on just covered the background with a cyan color, and I'm using different layer types, just flipping through them to see what it would do. Here I am adjusting the hue and saturation and the luminosity, just really wanting to make that background work but not take away from Luffy. So right here is a good example of using shadows. So the shadow where the light is hitting and that the shirt is coming over the pants, it's called a hard shadow. And then when it's branching out towards the knee, you'll see that it'll start to soften that shadow up and it'll start to blend more towards the edge. And that's kind of what you want, because light isn't stark like that everywhere. It basically wraps around an object. And once it wraps and gets further away from the light source, it's going to get softer. That really sells the surrealism of the image. And I did that here with the shirt passing under his arm. And then later on you'll see me throw on some shadows there on the belt or scarf thing he has going around on his waist there. Getting that shoe to pop there, or that flip-flop I should say. I thought about making the flip-flop look like it was flying off his other foot towards the camera, but then I recalled I had that idea for the paper to be doing that as well, and I didn't want to put too much floating around and distracting from Luffy. I just wanted to make a nice composition that's going to draw you right to his face and then lead your eye everywhere else as far as what's happening. Also, by the way, I used one brush pretty much throughout the almost all my illustrations. It's this marker brush I found on the Clip Studio Market. It was free, and it does everything. I mean, it does hard lines for sketches, for cleaning up the lines. I could paint with it. I even did the whole background with this pretty much. There was a few times I would use the soft round brush and like a little bit of a spray texture to get the water look like it's glistening, but that's rare. I mean, 99% of this whole image is with this one marker brush that I use. I mean, it's great. And I don't know why I didn't record much of me illustrating this bird. I don't draw birds a lot, and I had originally came up with a concept where I wanted the bird to look like it's bumping into Luffy as he's flying up rapidly into the sky, and he would knock the bird out cold and he's falling with all the flyers of the wanted posters going everywhere. So I tried some of that, and it was a little too much going on right there, so I decided to scrap that and just put the birds look like they're flocking around Luffy and he's flying through them, and then the posters just happen to be catching the wind and flying out around him as well. You know, as you're going along your image, you know, just think about where the light is hitting. You know, in this case, this is pretty straightforward, but if he were closer to the water, not so high in the sky, the water would actually cast a nice reflective light onto him. So keep that in mind if you're ever doing any sort of water scenes with your characters. Water is very reflective, so you got a lot of bounce light that you can work with, make the character look cool, stand out from the background. And here's those flyers we were discussing. I'm trying to get those laid in how I want them. Some overlapping the character, some smaller in the background to show that it's coming off that bird out of his pouch. And then I found this cool wanted poster from the anime online, so I went ahead and just pieced that on top of those flyers and tried to make it look as good as I could. Edited them up a little bit. So yeah, we're at the end of here of the illustration. Let's go ahead and see how it looks, guys.